In today's video, I'm going to address why and how to test your marketing messages. Because to be able to sell properly, you need to build your product or service's value communication strategy on a solid basis, grounded on top of what your target customers value most. There's no point in putting an extraordinary amount of effort into more operational aspects of marketing, such as investing in ads or in creating email funnels or being active on social media, etc., if what you're saying through those channels does not 1. Make people want to learn more about your product or service. 2. Create a positive expectation about your product or service's value. And 3. Eventually make people want to buy. The more you help people understanding just how much value your product will create for them, the better prepared you will be to be able to set a price that's aligned with that amount of value. Because people don't pay for what they don't expect to get. On top of this, if you get to test your value story prior to product development, you can get information regarding aspects that potential customers value that you might not be considering including in your product. So, testing your marketing claims before finishing your product development stage would help you not only figuring out the best way to sell it, but also potentially redefine some aspects of your final offering so that the one that you end up creating is more sellable. In other words, testing your envisioned value claims may help you solidifying your value creation strategy as well. But let's see how we would test those marketing messages, shall we? Let's start by taking a look at what we would need to do before talking to people about our value messages. Step number 1 in our value message testing preparation: identifying purchasing stakeholders. In a lot of purchase situations, we have a final user who has the freedom to select and pay for his or her own for the products that he or she is considering buying. In that case, there is only one person with full power to decide whether or not to buy, and we can focus on selling our product or service offering to that person alone. If that's your case, you can jump ahead to step number 2, timestamps in description. However, in a lot of situations, there are more people involved. For example, you may be selling a product to be used by several family members, and they may all be allowed to chime in when selecting what product they'd like to best. Or you may be selling a very high-priced product targeting a specific gender, and some people may need to get their spouse on board with the investment decision. Or you may also find yourself needing to be able to address the needs, concerns, and interests of a multitude of stakeholder groups. If you're selling to other businesses or institutions, that's not that uncommon. But what are the implications of this? Well, since we need to convince different groups of people regarding our product's value, and these groups aren't looking for the same thing in the product, we need to adapt our value story depending on who we are talking to at each point in time. Because if we need to convince those people too, we want to highlight how our product satisfies each particular person's specific needs. And that's why we must start by mapping who is likely to have a say in our product purchasing process. With some luck, that will just be one person. But that may not be the case. In case there are several different stakeholder groups with significant weight in the decision, we may need to talk to people from the several relevant groups to get feedback on our value story. Step number 2 in our value message testing preparation: generating our hypothesis regarding the purchasing criteria. Now that we have a list of the people who we think may have significant power in the decision to buy our product, it's time to try to make an educated guess regarding what matters the most to them. From here onwards, I'm going to assume that there's only one relevant stakeholder in your product's purchasing process, the buyer, but please note that this is just to make the video simpler. In real life, you'd need to consider all the relevant groups. So, considering what we already know about our customers from past interactions, and from some desk research that we can do without interviewing anyone, we're going to try to make an educated guess regarding what they're looking for in a product or service like ours. We want to identify wishes, needs, pain points, etc. And this leads us to step number 3 in our value message testing preparation: generating our hypothesis regarding customer segments that we may need to address differently. This may or may not be relevant for you, but let's cover it just in case it is. From our analysis from the previous step, we may suspect that there may be groups of people who are looking for different things from our product. For example, let's imagine that your product is an online yoga course. You may find that people who might buy a yoga course are looking for different things. Some might be looking to lose weight, others to improve strength or flexibility, others just want to keep active, others want to alleviate back pain, others might just enjoy it, and many may be looking for a combination of several of the previous. Now, you may be able to create a single course that helps several of the existing groups of people fulfilling their goals. So, with one single course, you might serve several different target customer segments. The problem is, since these people are looking for different things, even if from the same product, their interest in your product won't be equally stimulated by the same marketing messages or materials. In other words, although you may be able to develop one same product for a diversified group of people, you will have to engage in niche marketing, because there's no one generic marketing claim that appeals to everyone in that group. So, our goal with this step is to identify different groups of potential customers that we may want to communicate with in different ways because they're looking for different things. What we want to be able to do is to prioritize your course's value claims to match what the several groups of people you really want to serve value most. You might even want to create different marketing materials, if not full sales pages, to target each one of the different groups specifically. Because, as we know, the more we can make our product seem like it's exactly what a particular person is looking for, the more likely it is that we're able to make a sale. That means that we may benefit from communicating our product's value in different ways to different groups of people, even if the product is the same. Finally, step number 4, and last one in our value message testing preparation, defining hypothetical messages to test. So, the next thing to do is to try to make an educated guess regarding the value claims that will make each group more interested in learning more and eventually buy the product. And yes, I'm talking about already writing what you would expect to be the main marketing messages of your product on your sales page and on the marketing materials that you will use to sell the product to the several potential customer groups. Just to be clear, we will test actual key sentences word for word. These are the ones you plan to use in your marketing materials in prominent places such as headlines or ads. Obviously, we cannot test too many. We can only cover the really important ones. The rest of the sales copy will be guided by what we find out about the relevant purchase criteria. We don't need to be nitty-gritty about exact wording everywhere. But when it comes to the main value messages, details are important. People must self-identify with our main messages immediately, consider them important, and believe them. An important note here. If you want to target different potential customer groups, with which we think we may need to communicate with in different ways, we should talk to people from those different groups in our marketing research to confirm our hypothesis regarding what is more valuable to them, but especially to confirm that those groups really are different. It's not uncommon for product creators to go overboard with all of this, but at the end of the day, people often just aren't as different as might seem at first glance. Anyway, up until this stage, we have been formulating assumptions based on our own past experience regarding our market and possibly on some desk research that we can do on our own, such as looking at competitor websites and marketing materials, reading what people who might be our target customers are saying online, etc. But finally, it's time to talk to potential target customers and put those assumptions to the test. And here there are several things that we must test. Let's go one by one. First thing to test. Confirm that the purchasing stakeholders that we identified previously really are the correct ones. This is a very simple one, in principle. We just want to make sure that there isn't some unexpected gatekeeper or influencer that we didn't count on, but also that we aren't overcomplicating things. Sometimes, someone we thought would be a major gatekeeper turns out to be close to irrelevant. The opposite is also sometimes true. But this step is pretty straightforward. We just need to get an understanding of how the purchasing process works. With that, we should be able to identify purchasing influencers. Just ask the interviewee how they decide to purchase a given product, and that's it. So, let's move on to the second thing to test. Confirm that what we are assuming to be the relevant purchasing criteria really are the relevant purchasing criteria. Getting the decision criteria wrong is actually a lot easier than one might expect. It's surprisingly easy to develop misconceptions regarding what people value. In any case, we must understand what the relevant purchasing criteria really are, since our entire value communication strategy will rest on our ability to understand what people are looking for in our product. If we fail to get this one right, wording nuances will be irrelevant. We'll be trying to sell based on something that's not important for potential buyers and that won't get them to open up their wallets. So, how do we test for this? The simplest way to test for decision criteria relevance is to use a Likert scale and ask people to rate each of the criteria that we put together previously on a scale of, for example, 1 to 5, in which 1 means that the criterion isn't at all relevant for the purchase decision, and 5 means that the criterion is extremely important for the purchase decision. And don't forget to ask why and if there are any other important criteria that we didn't ask about. And by the way, just in case someone rates everything or almost everything the same, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, there's always one of those. Ask him or her to rank, for example, the top 3. Otherwise, we can't do anything with the data. And that's just a lazy answer, believe me. When it comes to real life, some criteria are always more important than others. Third thing to test, the actual hypothetical messages. Finally, we're going to test our value claims. And how will we do this? Well, first, we'll ask the potential customers to rate each message in terms of how important that value claim is, for example, to convince them to buy our product. We can again use a Likert scale from 1 to 5 or 1 to 7, in which 1 means that wouldn't convince me to buy that product, and 5 or 7 would be I would definitely buy the product because of that. Wording on the scale would be up to you, of course. This is just to give you an idea of how to use the method. Note also that you should ask people to rate the messages in terms of what your goal with that message is, which may not necessarily be a purchase. You may, for example, have a set of messages for an earlier stage of the sales process, in which your goal is to make people interested in learning more about the product and not necessarily buy it. In that case, 1 would be that message does not get me interested in learning more, and 5 would be that message gets me extremely interested in learning more about the product. We can additionally ask people if they have suggestions regarding the wording. Is it clear, appealing, relatable? Would they phrase it differently? And we should also ask if there's something else that they would consider to be one of the most valuable aspects of a product like ours that we didn't ask about. This one can yield a lot of very interesting information. But moving on, as said earlier, product claims don't just need to be important for the purchase decision process. They must also be credible. So, for the relevant value claims, we need to ask how credible they are, using a scale as in the previous steps. And in case they aren't considered credible, what sort of evidence we would need to provide to increase their credibility. For example, going back to the online yoga course example, let's imagine that a claim such as lose 10 pounds on your first month with this program gets a very high score in terms of relevance for a purchasing decision among people wanting to lose weight. However, when it comes to credibility, things don't look good. So, you need to find out what you can do to back up this claim to increase its credibility and whether that's possible at all. For example, would testimonials from past students help? If so, what type of testimonials? From what type of students? For example, in terms of starting weight, age, gender, etc. And what else might help you support that claim besides those testimonials? This is a very silly example, but I hope you get my point. Also, remember that this value message testing should be a part of a wider value discussion that includes assessing relevant product features and achievable price ranges. And a remark. Pay attention to your interviewees' wording when they describe what they value. You see, the value messages should be relatable so that people self-identify as having the problem that your problem solves for them. So, ideally, we would adapt our language to reflect the way our target customers express themselves, even if they don't suggest wording changes. The closer we can get to the potential buyer's own language, the more relatable our communication will be. Anyway, after all this, you should have an idea of 1. What the purchasing criteria for your product are and whether they are different among different groups of potential customers. This can guide your overall value story creation, helping you create marketing materials that speak to what people value most. 2. What value claims resonate with your potential customers the most, and whether there really are different groups that should be targeted differently. These key value claims can be used in prominent places in your marketing materials. If you have a chance, you can even further A/B test the winners post-launch to make sure that you're picking the absolute best ones. Of course, that would require an online presence, so this is not for everyone. 3. By the end of this exercise, you should also have an idea of how credible your value claims are. There's no point in using great-sounding ones that nobody believes, and whether there's a way to address any lack of credibility. So, this was only a basic explanation of value message testing, but I hope you found it useful. Bye!